is a well-known classical piece written by Mozart, and it was the first piece that I was able to play using that little keyboard, and it had a historic meaning for me. And also, of course, I mean, it's the Turkish mark, so it sort of represents my identity, so I wanted to name my company KV331. He mentioned something like people were actually laughing behind my back. They were laughing at SynthMaster's first version. With that achievement, I showed that I was not going to stop, and I didn't stop. What we're trying to achieve is to give musicians a synthesizer that they can run on all platforms. They can just do that anywhere in a cost-efficient way. I mean, that's what we're trying to give to the musicians around the world. It came from my father because he's also a very hard-working guy. He always works. That passed on from him to me. I think I was born with it.
Hi everyone, this is Ray Williams. We're here on another episode of Meet the Developers. Today, we're very fortunate to have Bulent from KV331 Audio to sit down and talk to us a little bit about himself, about his company, and we're going to dig right in and get to know him and get to know where SynthMaster came from. So Bulent, how you doing?
I'm doing pretty good, Ray. Thanks for inviting me.
Where are you right now?
I'm in Ankara, Turkey.
Are you born in Ankara?
Yes, I was born in Ankara in 1975.
So Bulent, tell us a little bit about yourself. Who are you?
I'm a kid born in a little town called Polatlı. It sounds like Palo Alto, but it's nothing like Palo Alto. I went to primary school there, and during those years, back in the 80s, my dad introduced me to this computer called Spectrum 48K. So it was, I think I was at the 4th grade, and that's when I started getting interested in computers. And then during middle school, I also got interested in music a lot. I had this little Yamaha keyboard with small keys. It didn't even have regular keys, you know? It had those small keys, and it had only 3.5 octaves. And with that keyboard, I mean, I was self-taught, and I managed to play things like Mozart's Turkish March, which is actually KV331.
So now we understand
yes,
where the name of the company comes from. So explain about the name and how that connection came with that keyboard.
Turkish March is a well-known classical piece written by Mozart, and it was the first piece that I was able to play using that little keyboard, and it had a historic meaning for me. And also, of course, I mean, it's the Turkish mark, so it sort of represents my identity. So I wanted to name my company KV331.
Now, were you into classical music? Were your family into classical music?
No, they are not into music at all. I mean, they had no interest in music at all. But somehow I got interested, and I actually have a cousin who is now a jazz pianist. And thanks to him and his dad, my uncle, I mean, we always used to listen to classical music and pop music like Beatles at their house. So I think that's when I started to get involved in music. And he just got a keyboard before me, and then I saw that he was playing this Casio keyboard, and then I asked my dad, hey, can you get one for me? I just want to learn how to play this, and that's how it started, basically.
And how old were you at this time, Bulent?
I think I was 13 years old. That's when I started playing that little keyboard, 13 years old.
You obviously enjoyed playing. Do you remember the model of the Yamaha keyboard?
It was PSS 220, something like that. The PSR models had large keys, but the PSS models had smaller keys. I had the PSS model.
Right. So you played that, and would it be safe to say you knew everything about that keyboard?
Yes, it was an FM synthesizer.
And how deep did it go? Could you program sounds in there, or was it just more performance?
No. They were all pre-programmed. No. It had like 100 presets or something like that.
So now you have this musical interest, and your computer interest is also growing, I assume, at that time?
Yes.
So where were you at 13 with computers and being interested in programming?
I was doing some basic programming. There's this computer language called BASIC, and back in the 80s it was a very popular language. Everyone in my age group, we learned BASIC. We even had class for BASIC at middle school. I think it was the 8th grade or something. They taught us BASIC, and yeah, I was programming in BASIC. And my cousin had a Commodore 64, and I remember I programmed it so that I was using the built-in keys on the Commodore 64 to play the SID chip inside the Commodore 64.
To give us a sense of what it was like to program in BASIC, how did you save your program?
You know what? I don't remember at all right now. But there's one thing I remember. Even when I was at middle school, I started learning assembly language, because I remember I had to learn the Commodore 64 assembly language to access the SID chip or something like that.
So can you give us a sense of what it was like to program in the Commodore 64? For example, where did you save your programs?
Surprisingly, to Z generation, we used to save them to cassette tapes.
Amazing. You didn't even have a floppy drive?
No.
This sounds exciting, and it's funny. I shouldn't inject myself into this conversation, but you know what? In Canada, on the other side of the world, I was having the same experience. So I completely understand.
Yeah.
I had a Commodore 64. It did have a floppy drive, though, and I used to save my programs on there. So now you're a teenager. What's happening with school? I mean, I'm sure your parents want you to become a doctor, a lawyer, accountant, one of those kind of stable professions, correct?
Yeah, I mean, my dad was also a mechanical engineer, so they wanted me to be an engineer. Yeah, and luckily, after high school, I managed to be enrolled at Middle East Technical University. You know, in Turkey, it's difficult to be accepted to universities like that because there's an entrance exam in which 2 million students enter. And you have to be at the top 1,000 to be at universities like Middle East Technical University or Bulent University. Those are the top universities in Ankara. I don't remember working too hard, but I managed to be, my rank was, I think, 697. I still remember that ranking. And yeah, I managed to study at Middle East Technical University Electrical Engineering Department.
So you're in there, you're fulfilling your parents' wish, you're going to be an engineer like your dad. How do you get into computers?
After my first year, I remember I started learning Visual Basic, not Basic, but this time Visual Basic. I started learning Visual Basic, and I wrote this simple Windows application in which you can add some waveforms, add some filters to that, and you can synthesize a waveform but offline, not in real time, and then you can load that onto your creative Sound Blaster sound card. And I actually, that was back in 1995, and I named that software SynthMaster.
So SynthMaster was an offline system where you synthesize the sound offline and then you load it into the Sound Blaster, and presumably there. And how would you access it in a Sound Blaster?
Creative Labs had this application, I don't remember its name right now, but so that in this application you can edit sound fonts. That's what I remember. So you can edit sound fonts. It's like a multi-sample editor, and you can load samples onto the sound card. That's how it was, I guess.
So were you happy with the sounds you were creating on this tool way back when? Were you excited when you heard it on the Sound Blaster?
Yeah, I was really excited. But back then I had no idea how analog synth sounded like. So I mean, it was all digital, and I didn't know the difference between analog and digital.
In your world, in Ankara, Turkey, what kind of synths do you have access to?
None, zero. I mean, I did not know anything about synths back then, and I didn't know any of them. But I remember Korg M1. Korg M1 was really famous back then.
Popular, very popular. Very popular.
It was very popular, yeah. That's the only synth I remember, Korg M1, yeah.
Now you're coming out of teenage years, you're starting to get interested in making your own products. Why are you not running around with your friends, doing teenage stuff?
I don't know, maybe, I think I was a geek. I mean, I was just interested in music and computers, that was it. I mean, they even wrote that in my yearbook after I graduated from middle school. In my yearbook, my friends wrote, Bulent is really interested in three things: computers, music, and girls. That's written in my yearbook by my friends.
So okay. So you're just a nerd. You just love this stuff. There's no explanation for it. It's just inside of you. But you're still in school studying mechanical engineering, right?
No, electrical engineering.
Electrical engineering. So do you become an electrical engineer?
Yeah, I did. I mean, I studied electrical machines, circuits, digital signal processing, and computer hardware. I studied all of those subjects, and I graduated with a GPA of 3.02 out of 4.
Wow. Okay. So now what? Now you've got this degree. You're going to be electrical engineer, and you're not going to make any sense. So when do you start thinking of going into this direction?
It was at the end of my third year. I actually, I really knew a lot of, I really learned DSP at the end of my third year. So during my fourth year as a graduation, I needed to do a graduation project, to complete the fourth year. And as my graduation project, I chose this Windows app. I wrote this Windows application, which was a real-time effects processor running on Windows, and I built all of the basic effects in SynthMaster right now. I had a distortion. I even had a FFT-based filter, an equalizer, a delay effect, a compressor effect. I wrote all of those inside that software, and after my graduation, I actually released that as a shareware application. I remember people sending me regular mail, not email, sending money in regular email to purchase that.
Give us a sense. I mean, because the way you describe it, it's like you just went out and made some DSP effects. Give us an idea as to how difficult this is. How difficult is it to make a compressor when you're that age and when you have that level of experience?
If you have the interest, I mean, if there's a will, I think there will be a way somehow. I don't know how I found the information, but I don't know if the software had 10 effects or 3 effects. I think for the graduation project, I didn't want to give away the entire stuff, so I only included 3 effects in my graduation project. But the shareware software released had all of them. And honestly, I don't remember right now how I learned about stuff like compressors or distortion effects. I just built them somehow at that age.
Here's what I'm curious about. You've never made this before, so it's like making a pizza or making soup. How do you know when it's good enough for other people to use?
I didn't have a reference. That's what I'm saying. Somehow I wrote them and I released the software, and then this company in Canada, they discovered me.
Which company was that?
PG Music.
The makers of Band in a Box?
Yes, Peter Gannon. Maybe you know him in person. Yeah, Peter, he discovered me.
And how does he discover you? I guess from the shareware.
From the shareware, and it was. I mean, I'm seeing that the moment I received his email, I see that sort of like an act of God. Because I'm going to explain you now why I felt like that. It was one day before my girlfriend was leaving Turkey. She was going to Boston to study at MIT. And I had no idea how I was going to go to the US and be with her. And I was desperate. And suddenly I received this email out of nowhere just one day before she leaves. And the guy is inviting me to work with him. Isn't that an act of God or something?
That is unbelievable. I mean, like,
yeah,
wow.
It happened to me.
So I'm sure it didn't take you long to say yes.
Of course. I mean, I started working at a defense company in Turkey. It's the biggest defense company in Turkey, but I only worked there for 2 months, and then I quit that job. And first I started working online for Peter, and then I got the work permit, the work visa, and then I moved to Victoria, BC.
Now, Victoria, BC, compared to Ankara, what is that like? What is that transition like?
It is unbelievable because I'm this guy who has only visited 3 cities in Turkey: Ankara, my hometown Polatlı, and my summer house in Antalya. That's it. I didn't know any other places in the world up until I was 22 years old.
And how did that transition work out for you? How did you find living in Canada?
It was really fun. I mean, living alone at that age, it was a great experience. But of course, I mean, it wasn't enough for me because somehow I had to move to the US. I mean, I had to be with my girlfriend. So while I was working at PG Music, I was applying to jobs in the US, and one day I get this call from a headhunter, and he said, "There's this company called Digidesign. They want to interview." Yeah, Digidesign.
And for people who may not be aware, what is the modern name of Digidesign?
I'm sorry, but I don't accept that name still to this day. Have it.
For me, honestly, I still love the old name.
Of
Digidesign.
course.
We used to call him
I mean,
Digi. We used to just
Digi,
call
yeah.
him Digi, right?
Digi, right? Yeah. Yes, it was called Digi, not even Digidesign. And I mean, it's so sad, but I don't want to talk anymore on this.
So you get a call from a headhunter from at that time probably the biggest and the most forward-looking company in the industry. What is going through your mind though?
I mean, I said, "Oh man, I should get this job." Yeah, and I remember I went to the interview, and when I went to the interview, I borrowed my dad's credit card or something. I didn't even have a credit card back then. It was so funny. But yeah, I mean, the interview went well, and then the manager. I had a long interview actually. Around 6 or 7 people interviewed me in the DAE team, Digidesign Audio Engine team. And then, thankfully, I mean, they hired me and they got me my H-1B visa. And I moved to Palo Alto, to the heart of Silicon Valley.
So now you're a long way away from Ankara.
Right.
You're now in the United States.
Yes.
Again, how
Yes.
old are you at this time, Bulent?
I was 23 years old. Almost 24. Between 23.5, something like that.
But I thought you were trying really to go to Boston to be with your girlfriend at that time, no?
Of course, my goal was to go to Boston, but I mean, of course, after seeing the environment at Digidesign, I mean, I really wanted to work there, and also that was my only opportunity, so I had to accept that position. And because of that, my girlfriend, she decided to go along with me, and she continued her PhD at Stanford instead of MIT. And that after I started Digidesign in 1999, we got married in 1999, July 24th.
Wow, so now you guys are both together in California.
Yes, we spent 4 years in California. It was a great time.
Now tell me about what you were working on. When you first started Avid or Digidesign, what did they put you to work on?
For the first 6 months or something, they just assigned me on bug fixing, so that I would get familiar with the code base, with the source control system. They had some. I don't even remember their source control system, but it was a famous one. And I mean, I was fixing bugs, but one day, Dave Lebold came and he gave me specifications on an effect called de-esser, and he helped me write the de-esser that was released with Pro Tools 6.
At the time, Digidesign was really on the bleeding edge of all this digital audio revolution, and they must have had some of the smartest programmers in DSP and in audio. You've had some relatively, modest experience as a programmer. how good were you as a programmer at that time to be given that responsibility to fix bugs?
I remember I found a serious bug in, I think, Media Composer or something like that, because I was testing Pro Tools inside Media Composer, and I managed to find an important bug which prevented Pro Tools to work with Media Composer. And I think Mike Cummings, he was our director back then, he congratulated me and he offered me a champagne or something like that for fixing that bug.
But this is quite an amazing story, because for people watching this, other 21, 22, 23, 24-year-olds, to be given that kind of position, how much work, how many hours did you put in since you were 13 to learn and practice programming?
Well, I did my most work after during my university years, actually. I mean, my peers were doing practical training, but I just didn't do that officially, and I learned Visual Basic. I spent my entire summer learning Visual Basic. I remember that, and I wrote this SynthMaster software. And since then, I always worked hard and tried to learn how different effects work. I even remember during my interview at Digidesign, I showed them this Windows application, which was a mixer utilizing Pentium's new MMX instruction set. I really emphasized on stuff like optimizing code using assembly language, and maybe that was an important point in them to hire me, because Digidesign's, Digidesign Pro Tools used to run in hardware cards, in hardware running on Motorola chips, and to write a plugin for Motorola, you have to write in assembly language. And I was really good at assembly even back then. I mean, I knew how to write assembly language.
Right, but I want to get a sense. I mean, you put in a lot of hours in your craft.
Yeah, I mean, my weekends, my overtime hours. I mean, yeah, I worked hard. But it's been like 25 years, so I don't exactly remember how it was back then. But yeah, I worked hard. But actually, I mean, my real working hours were after, I went back to Turkey back in 2006, and I had this daytime job, but I had this ambition to start my own VST company. That was when I really worked my ass off, actually. I really worked hard. My nights, weekends, I mean, it was crazy.
So tell me about that transition. So what happened? Did you leave Avid to go back to Turkey?
Not exactly. I worked at Avid for like 2 years, and then we moved to Boston again for my wife's postdoctoral studies. And then we moved to Ohio. And in Boston and Ohio, I mean Columbus, Ohio, I actually worked at IT companies. I was out of the audio industry for a while. But back in 2004, when we were in Boston, while I was babysitting my first older son, Yunus, I was actually back in my audio roots, and I was developing this software called SynthMaster again, but this time as a plugin, as a real-time application, not offline. So SynthMaster officially started in 2004.
Now you've moved back to the Boston, the East Coast, essentially, and you start working on SynthMaster again. What kind of synthesizer were you trying to make?
Well, it was sort of an extension of the offline synthesizer I wrote back in the 90s. There was I think there were 2 oscillators which were additive oscillators. You can mix 8 different waveforms, and then you had 2 filters, 2 envelopes. I mean, I don't even remember the specifications right now. That was the first version of SynthMaster, basically. But it was completely a digital synthesizer, and It didn't have anything like analog modeling or things like that. It was a very basic synthesizer.
How long does it take you from that moment or that time to the first sort of public release of that?
Well, I released that first version at the end of 2006. That's what I remember. So I worked for like 3 years part-time, but not full-time, because I had daytime jobs to bring bread to the table. But I spent my entire nights and weekends part-time on that project, and it took me. So in full-time man hours, I think it was 1.5 years full-time, 3 years part-time.
Now you keep mentioning the word digital throughout the interview, and I want to get a sense. What is the essence and the value and the sort of allure of analog from your perspective?
Well, it sounds much warmer. I mean, back in those times, I mean, I didn't know the difference between analog and digital. But later on, I mean, I started acquiring some hardware synths, and I listened to them, like the Roland Juno 106. I mean, and then I understood that my software wasn't sufficient. I mean, I had to improve that all the time to make it sound more analog.
So for analog, you're really looking at warmth. Now, how do you program warmth in a digital environment? Because digital has the sort of connotation of being, precise, cold, antiseptic.
Well, you have to add some non-linearities, some randomness. For instance, the oscillators in analog synths, I mean, they drift over time. Even the filters, I mean, any parameter in an analog synth, it might drift over time because of temperature changes, stuff like that. So I think that gives analog its character. In the digital domain, it's really hard to model that, actually. I mean, you have to have lots of small non-linearities, but you shouldn't have too much of those, because then it would sound harsh again, it would sound digital. And you have to have lots of oversampling. I mean, 44 kilohertz doesn't cut for analog synthesis in any way.
Do you ever use hardware beside your software as a sort of an A/B test or system to see how you make it out?
Yeah, I have some analog synths like Moog Sub-Fatty, I mean, or Roland SH101. I have around 10 hardware synths. And yeah, I tried to A/B, and I also sampled their waveforms and incorporated them as single cycle waveforms inside SynthMaster and SynthMaster 1. That gives a more realistic output.
2006, SynthMaster's released. What's the reaction? You remember?
Yeah, I remember the reaction. I mean, at that time, I was very active on KVR audio forums, and I mean, there wasn't much positive reaction, actually, because it was a digital synth, and it wasn't bringing anything new to the table. There wasn't really that there wasn't any hype or anything, but I mean, that didn't just let. Of course, I was a bit let down, but that didn't stop me. I mean, I said I'm gonna work hard and I'm gonna do this better, and I'm not going to give up in any way. And I continued improving it up until version 2.5, and that was around the end of actually 2010, I guess, if I remember correctly. And in 2011 I released SynthMaster version 2.5, and with that version Computer Music Magazine reviewed that, actually, and they gave a 10 out of 10 review grade to SynthMaster, and that was the time things started to change for me. I mean, commercially, people started to take it a little bit more seriously, actually. And I quit my daytime job because I was working at a software company in the defense industry in Turkey, STM, and I quit STM, and I applied to this technology park in the Bulent University campus. We have technology parks in university campuses. where software companies can just rent their offices. But the good thing is, I mean, they give us a lot of tax advantages. So I started my company in the technology park in Bulent University in 2012 officially. Up until 2012, it was all unofficial.
And is that the point where you start getting your first employees?
No, it wasn't until 2015. I asked my brother to help me out, and I asked his help to bring SynthMaster to iOS, because iOS applications were on the rise. So we decided to release the player version of SynthMaster, which is basically a rompler, as a free application on Apple's App Store. And my brother, he wrote the code for the user interface. And after we released it back in 2015, he was my first employee. He joined me. And then I think it was 2015 again. I hired my second employee, who is Gerçek Dorman, who is now my product manager.
Prior to these two employees, you were doing everything, including the GUI as well?
So I created the layout for the GUI. For the first version, we were an entirely Turkish team. The GUI was done by a friend called Umut Dervish. And the sound design were done by my dear friend Teoman Pasilnioğlu. I mean, we were a completely Turkish team. But after that first version, after I got the reactions from KVR Audio, I just decided to go international.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I said I'm gonna play this by the book, and I will just meet with the well-known sound designers on KVR like Big Tone. That guy actually, he helped me a lot, and he put up with me, and he was really patient in guiding me. And he's Nico Hertz, by the way. He's a very well-known, respected sound designer from Germany, Stuttgart, and he really helped me make SynthMaster more professional.
So at this time, you've got a company. Do you have any time at all to play with SynthMaster yourself?
Actually, other than developing new features and bug fixing, no. I mean, I'm not a musician in any way, and I mean, I can't improvise, I can't compose. I know my limits. I can play the piano, but that's it. I mean, improvisation and composing, that's another stuff. I mean, I have zero talent on that, so no, I can't do that.
So now there's a lot of acclaim around the world. Are you happy with SynthMaster?
Believe it or not, I'm still working hard to deserve that name, SynthMaster. Because when you have a name like SynthMaster, I mean, you have to live up to the hype, you know, because the name is SynthMaster. So initially it was sort of like, I mean, initially I don't think I deserved that name, but over time, I mean, we're getting near, especially with version 3, it's gonna be a SynthMaster. Yeah, I can claim that. But there are still some areas we have to improve, like we have some analog modeled filters, but I never claim and say that they are really the best. I mean, because I know that they are not. There are better analog models plugins like Diva. I really respect Uhe, by the way. I mean, Ur Sekman. I mean, SynthMaster's filters are still not that good, but I'm working hard to make them as good as those guys.
What has it been like developing software in Turkey? What are some of the pluses, minuses, some of the advantages, some of the things people may not know?
There are more pluses than minuses. I mean, the biggest plus is being in a technology park. In technology parks, we don't pay any corporate tax, and we don't pay any income tax for employees. If for developers, not all the employees, but the software engineers, for them, we don't pay any income tax. So that's the plus side. I mean, and so far I don't see any negative side. I have to think about that.
Now, what surprised you the most? Now you've had this big long journey, 2 decades, going on 3 almost. Looking back, what surprised you the most about sort of starting and running your software company?
I mean, I'm really surprised that I was able to come to this point without like zero customers to right now. We have hundreds of thousands of users, including our users on iOS. I mean, and everyone knows about us. I mean, I'm really surprised about that. I mean, when I look back, like if I was told that in 20 years ago, if I was told that SynthMaster would come to this place, I mean, I wouldn't believe it, but now I believe it, and I believe that it's going to be a lot more when we release version 3.
When you look back, what are some of the things you wish you knew then that you know now?
Still to this day, I mean, my modeling hardware, I'm not really good at that, and I believe I still have to improve that.
Have you ever collaborated with other software companies?
I don't know if it will be a collaboration, but we actually had a deal with Steven Slate. He's also a software company. we had a deal 4 years ago with Steven Slate, and we are actually in his everything bundle. I mean, SynthMaster is part of his everything bundle. If that counts as a collaboration, I don't know.
You've been involved with IMSTA in the past. What does IMSTA bring to a company like KV331?
Well, it's really great to be a part of IMSTA and to participate in their international shows. Like we participated in New York, in Toronto, in Berlin, and also in London. I mean, we attended all of those IMSTA events, and thanks to IMSTA, we were able to meet lots of our users in those events, and we got really positive feedback from them. And we met with other developers in those events.
Has there been any impact of the coronavirus on your business?
Well, last year, initially, when the pandemic started, yes, just like the other software companies, we were impacted positively, especially in April 2020. I mean, our sales were up, and I can't complain, it was a good time for us. But after summer, I mean, I think it went back to normal.
For a lot of people watching, young people that are interested in programming, people interested in music, and they want to do something like what you're doing, or they have an idea, what's your advice to them? How do they get started? How do they overcome all the obstacles that tend to fall in the way of young people?
I think it's much easier for the new generation because there are frameworks like Juice to develop VST plugins. I mean, they can start off with Juice to build their plugins. And there are also really good resources on the internet. I would highly suggest Professor Julius O. Smith's website at Stanford University. They should check his website out. I mean, they can find all the necessary stuff for musical signal processing in Professor Smith's website. And there are also other websites like musicdsp.org. That's also a good starting point for the young generation who want to start developing VST effects and instruments.
What's it like when you see some real VIP, famous musicians contact you? And could you name a few of them? What's that like? What kind of satisfaction is that? Tell us a little bit about that, Bulent.
It's really a great satisfaction. For instance, I received an email from a guy called Steve Vai. And he said he emailed me through our info email address, and he asked some questions, and apparently he purchased SynthMaster from Sweetwater through you guys. I mean, it was I exchanged emails with him, and it was a great experience. And also similarly, I mean, I know people like Jordan Rudess. I mean, he's also a very famous music tech guy and keyboard player, you know. It's really a great feeling to be in the same environment with those people and to know them in person. I feel really privileged.
And to think that it all started with the Yamaha PSS.
Yes, exactly. And my perseverance, of course. I mean, I didn't give up. I mean, for instance, I remember that this sound designer who helped me a lot, Big Tone, he mentioned something like, I mean, people were actually laughing behind my back on the KVR forums. They were laughing at SynthMaster's first version, and of course they were right, because it was a very basic digital, I mean, synthesizer that brought nothing new to the table. But it was with that achievement I showed that I was not going to stop, and I didn't stop. And I worked on improving it, and I brought it to this point.
Do you think any of your determination was learned and developed, or do you think you were born with it?
I think I'm born with it. I don't know. Maybe it came from my father, because he's also a very hardworking guy. He always works. Maybe that passed on from him to me. I don't know. I mean, I think I was born with it.
Did your father expose you to a lot of things as a kid, like a lot of technical things?
Not much, but I mean, at least he exposed me to computing by purchasing this Spectrum 48K computer. Yeah, and also that small keyboard, Yamaha PSS keyboard.
What's next for KV331? Are you going to make effects? Are you going to make a DAW? What are the things you have in your future?
No, we're not planning to make a DAW. I mean, we're not that big, but and the world doesn't need another DAW. But yeah, we have to concentrate on modeling effects like delay units, distortions, or guitar cabinets. I'm actually planning to hire at least one new engineer this summer, hopefully, if everything goes well, and maybe another content creator to create some samples for us, like sampling hardware and creating multi-samples out of that. I mean, we have to create a lot of new content for SynthMaster, and also we have to create new effects, and we have to enter into new markets, like guitar effects.
You speak a lot about modeling. With modeling technology, realistically, Bulent, how close can you get to the original hardware?
If you care about the details, I mean, if you can hear the differences really well, I think you have to have a really good ear, and you have to make a lot of A/B tests with using like spectral analyzers and stuff. I mean, I think you can get close.
Have you looked at any use of AI in what you do?
I didn't have time, and so far I know nothing about that, but it looks like a promising topic actually.
You've done very well with yourself, Bulent. You made a great contribution to music and to synthesizers. Speak directly to people who are watching this and sort of explain to them what you think the contribution of SynthMaster has been.
I think with SynthMaster, what we're trying to achieve is to give musicians a synthesizer that they can run on their computers, they can run on their phones, and they can run on their tablets, on all platforms, and they can just do that anywhere in a cost-efficient way. I mean, that's what we're trying to give to the musicians around the world. A software that runs on all devices, and which is actually a cost-effective software that any musician can afford on the globe. And I'm thinking like we are reaching that goal.
Well, thank you very much for your time. Any last words for the customers that have supported you for so well over the years? Any last words to them?
I'm really very grateful to them for supporting us so far, and they will be rewarded with more content, hopefully, with SynthMaster 3. We have new content coming for them, and I really am grateful to them. I would like to thank them personally, to all of them.